Welcome to another edition of Against the Current, coming to you from atop the Old Republic building at the Skyline Club in downtown Chicago. Coming to you about a month before the March 20th primary election in Illinois. And pleased to have on this installment three leading conservative reform legislators in the State House. From my left to right, he's State Representative Tom Morrison, a Republican from Palatine. State Representative Margo McDermed, a Republican from Mokina. State Representative Peter Breen, Republican from Lombard, also the House Republican floor leader. Today we're going to talk about the election, but also in the context of policy with the latest session of the General Assembly now in full swing, and the same discussions we've been having in Illinois about budget problems and business climate problems and tax and spend problems that we've been having since basically before my birth. Thank you all for joining me. Appreciate your time. It's good to have a little roundtable discussion here, get some different perspectives within the conservative reform Republican ranks. So why don't we start with this session and this year's budget and that process after what I would describe, I think you all would describe per your votes, as sort of a catastrophic session last year in 2017, where we wound up with another kick the can down the road budget with more spending and the largest structural income tax increase, permanent income tax increase in the history of Illinois, and no spending reforms, nothing that signals to the outside world that Illinois is ready to chart a different course and be a productive place to live, work, and raise a family. So, Peter, start with you since you're the floor leader. You know, we'll go by honorific. Okay. The governor has given his State of the State address. He's given his budget address. How sanguine are you about progress in 2018? Always difficult in an election year.
Well, I think most of us have very low expectations for the Madigan-run House, the Cullerton-run Senate. You know, the budget process, we're looking at $1.7 billion in a deficit from last year's budget, the one we're living in now. We're looking at a $3 billion hole in next year's budget. And I don't sense that the Democrats are willing or ready to have the discussion about where are we going to reduce the dreaded cuts that we all know we need, but there's no real willingness on the other side to talk about.
And this is sort of an important point just to kind of frame and put an exclamation point on right here. So after that largest tax increase, increase in the personal as well as the corporate income tax, we're still running budget deficits in a state with $250 billion in aggregated debt. And so, you know, when I think this is kind of one of the questions that a lot of people have, particularly business people. You know, when does the state run out of runway to continue operating the same way it's been operating and piling up more debt as you're extracting more wealth from the people that are deciding to remain, and that's fewer and fewer with each passing day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How many more downgrades are left?
Yeah.
There's not very many.
Just one.
One or two?
Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
So then
I
guess we'll find out what's going to happen.
I mean, I don't know. I would say to some extent, I would look to the suburban Democrats who are feeling some of the same things. For those of us who are suburban Republicans, our constituents are leaving. They are fleeing. They can flee, and they are. I mean, folks are leaving across the state, but it's been tough to get Democrats, legislators anywhere in the state, to go on record and agree that folks are leaving in record numbers. I mean,
they deny that people are leaving.
Well, the conversation in our household is my wife said, well, yeah, the Democrats aren't going to complain about Republicans leaving the state, except that if they're the ones financing the state, or a big chunk of it, that's a problem.
Well, and the reality too is, you know, not every Democrat has J.B. Pritzker's means. So there's a lot of regular middle-income Democrats in the suburbs and throughout the rest of the state that are feeling the same crunch that Republicans are. I mean, this is about math. It's not about party affiliation, right?
That's right.
That's why every time I get up and talk on the House floor, I say we all have to go forward together. You can't go forward without the folks that are paying the piper.
So how do we go forward together and that not be going forward together off the edge?
We have to start cutting. We have to start saying no to some special interest group somewhere.
Well, and on pensions, for example, there seems to be almost universal agreement that we could put new hires into a 401k style plan. And I routinely talk to public employees about that. Last night I talked to a Chicago cop, retired. He said, yeah, absolutely. Put the new hires into a 401k. It's constitutional. The expectation right from day one of your job is you're in a defined contribution plan. It gets harder for those who were expecting a defined benefit, you know, especially if they get close to retirement to talk about that. But I'm 43, and I talk to a lot of public school teachers my age and younger. They're open to shifting some of their future retirement benefits over to a defined contribution plan. They do not want Springfield politicians having their hands on their retirement benefits. They want an individualized account that, you know, so they're diversified essentially. They've got their money in the market just like most of the rest of us do.
And right, and we have some 20,000 university employees that can share their personal experience who have chose 401ks,
Yep.
are in 401ks. I don't hear the kind of screaming and the Chicken Little routine from those employees. How about having those employees be ambassadors to other employees?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those individuals had a choice.
Right.
But when it comes to, I know you asked about when do we run out of runway. I mean, we have to signal to our taxpayers, to residents, to businesses that we're really serious about pension reform. And passing that sort of a bill, while it wouldn't necessarily solve the problem, it wouldn't solve the problem. We still have huge debts, but it would at least signal that we're serious about it. And thus far, I've been down in Springfield, this is my 8th year, I haven't seen real serious push for this. I mean, yes, there was the passage of SB 1 that might have provided some savings, but I voted no because it wasn't sufficient in my mind. And I was concerned about the constitutionality of it, which here we are, we're 3 years later, no progress on pension reform. If we're going to go through the effort of real pension reform, let's actually do something that's going to make a big impact.
And there are some other proposals out there, for example, buying out some folks, you know, buying out the present discounted value of what's due to them and try to reduce our liabilities and put those people in control of their own fate.
But how do we buy them out? What are we going to buy them out with? We've got, what's the backlog of bills?
Well, we're under 10 billion now.
Super.
Yeah,
But I mean, but it's tough. It's a tough sell to say we're going to prioritize buying people's pensions out rather than paying money owed to social service providers and state contractors that have been waiting, in some cases, years for remuneration for work provided, work performed and services provided.
Well, but to Tom's point and to Margo's point, we do need to have an honest. We can't have an honest conversation about any of this. We really need to be having a global conversation about pensions. We all know the Tier 1 workers are continuing to accrue liabilities, and everyone's just said, "Oh, the Supreme Court spoke, and we can't touch that, and let's not talk about it anymore." The Supreme Court didn't actually say that. And really, if we're serious about stopping the hundreds of billions of dollars in liability, or at least doing something to arrest its growth, we could get together with the best lawyers in the General Assembly, from the private sector, and actually come up with some other bills that really would test that point. Because I still doubt, I just don't understand how the Supreme Court could find that we have got to pay for someone who's on a Tier 1 pension and who has 40 more years to work or 30 more years to work, that we're stuck, that we've got to pay them an exorbitant amount down the road.
For work not yet performed.
For work not yet performed.
And the
No one's got a right
compounding
to a
is
job with the government.
Well, and the other thing too, it seems to me that normally when I hear Democrats invoking the Constitution as a defense, that's because they have no other. So they're using that
and where's
conveniently.
And what about the line in our Illinois Constitution about a balanced budget?
Yeah, right. Well, they're a little bit pick and choosy about
Yeah.
portions of the Constitution that they're particularly concerned about. But the point is to say, look, you're a constitutional lawyer, Peter, and there are others down there who believe that previous iterations were constitutional, even though the Supreme Court ruled differently. So going back to it to say this is something I believe does and should pass constitutional muster, and if the public sector union bosses want to litigate it again to the detriment of their rank and file members, then let's have at it. But you can't kind of not do anything because you're trying to read the tea leaves of what the Supreme Court will accept or not accept. Can you?
No, I think we're at a place, I mean, I think our Democratic colleagues, they don't expect to pay these benefits down the road. I think they are acting, at least, whatever they say, they are acting like we're on a track to bankruptcy and that there is no alternative. That's what they're acting like. I mean, I'd love to see us actually grapple with this issue and try to avoid that eventuality.
And so, you know, just kind of speaking to that generally, in this political season, an election year, primary month away, as I mentioned, you've got all kinds of discussions about repealing that income tax increase, corporate income tax increase that was installed last year with Democrats and surrender Republicans, your colleagues, 15 of your colleagues in the House. And the governor says he's going to repeal it right away, although in his budget address, his proposed budget, the broad outline, it contemplates, it's predicated on the revenue that's anticipated from that tax increase. So it seems like he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth, as perhaps there's some other people who say, repeal it right away, snap your fingers, wave a wand, and we're going to repeal that. Is that feasible, speaking of that realistic conversation?
I think it's a good opportunity for people to say things that they know are never going to happen. There's no legislation, there's no effort. Do you hear anybody talking about that other than campaigners? No, that's not going to happen.
Right. But I think it goes back to, you know, during the crisis, the Dems were throwing budgets just absolutely out of balance, just ungodly out of balance budgets at the governor, saying, "Will you cut the heck out of this, and then we'll, you know, why don't you just balance it yourself?" We all realized that it's literally impossible because you need structural reforms within the government, within the Medicaid system, within the pension system, within all of the ways we do business as a government in order to get those costs down so that you could repeal that income tax increase. Right now, no one's got a credible plan, though, to take us from 495 to 375, much less back to 3, which is where we all want it to go. That's where we started, the income tax rate. And if we took on, I mean, I think the plans are all on the shelf. I mean, the think tanks have come up with all these plans. We've got to just select a few of them and start to implement them and then see if we can bring that rate down.
It seems to me, though, you can't even get unanimity of opinion within Republican caucuses on something like rolling back the Obamacare Medicaid expansion. We couldn't afford the Medicaid program before Obamacare expansion. Right. Now you're tracking to maybe 1 in 3 Illinoisans being Medicaid eligible. This is starting to become like a middle income family entitlement. And that's not what the program is intended to do. It's not who the program is intended to serve. It's not financeable. But there's a lot of Republicans that are jumpy about rolling back a entitlement once conferred, just like Democrats, aren't there?
Yeah.
We heard some of that at the time of the tax increase. I think we had some tears.
I mean, in terms of Republicans who voted for the tax increase because they're trying to finance the unfinanceable.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you said it. Once you give away a benefit, it's very, very difficult to claw it back. And so, whatever you're talking about, it's.
But I know it's difficult. But my point is to say,
I'm willing to do it.
Right.
I can do it. I mean.
Yeah, but the kind of, you know, the Republican Party speaking with one voice to do it and to say something has got to give. This is an expansion of a program that we couldn't finance prior to. Maybe, like you said, context of a holistic vision for what the new financial reality of Illinois is. But I just don't hear a lot of arguments being made. It seems like there's a lot of focus on, you know, blame shifting and kind of, you know, cursing legislative leaders and so forth. Not that there's not merit to that, but it doesn't get us very far.
Well, here's the other thing you might hear is, look, if we propose these sort of the cuts, then we'll never get a majority. We'll never take back the House. We'll never take back the Senate. So let's just hold off. Let's not take those hard stands.
Hold off until when?
I don't know. That's why it's not a very good strategy.
Right.
But
I mean, yeah, right, exactly. We'll never get the majority that we haven't had since 1994 in the House.
We'll be the last 3 Republicans in the state.
Yeah.
Actually,
I mean,
yeah,
you know, this is the amazing thing. I come back to this so often, but we're a super minority party in this state, run by Chicago Democrats for our collective lifetimes, and destroyed by Chicago Democrats, and yet the strategy is to mirror Chicago Democrats.
Well, but to your point about, you know, so rolling back the Medicaid expansion, that is something that most conservatives would agree with 100%. But you do have to offer folks an alternative. So J.B. Pritzker, as I understand it, is not talking about rolling it back. He's talking about expanding it to everybody in Illinois. Just come on down. You get Medicaid. I mean, usually most folks would have thought it was a dirty word. You're like, I don't want to get Medicaid. I always hear terrible things about the service there. Why can't we offer some sort of an alternative? I mean, to some extent, maybe we've got to work with our federal legislators to try to come up with a plan for that. They can't figure this out either. But on each of these issues, there is a place for our more conservative vision to come through. But again, you can offer folks an alternative without saying, oh, we're just going to cut it. And I think that's something maybe with our messaging we could get done.
Well, and the other thing,
yeah.
well, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the Governor Rauner's budget proposal was cuts to Medicaid providers. You know, in other words, reimbursement rates, which I don't know about your districts, but I'm hearing from providers saying,
Just stop taking Medicaid patients then.
yeah, exactly. That's right. So how is that compassionate? How is
Yeah,
that
right.
making the system work when the people who absolutely need it can't get it?
Or it's actually, it's sometimes better for the doctor to literally give them the care for free
Right.
than to bother billing Medicaid.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
We hear from the Med Society, you can't cut anymore.
Well, that's right. So I'm going to provide a service at below my cost, and what, I'm going to make it up on volume? I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
And I won't be reimbursed for 2 years.
Yeah.
So, right. So as you
It's like
say,
a 2000s.com.
Yeah. So, but again, it's always this kind of, we'll get to the cuts as soon as we have all the spend figured out. So you never get to the cuts because you're always focused on trying to come up with the spend for things you know you can't find. I mean, it's the same thing as this conversation about the work requirement for able-bodied Medicaid recipients. Governor Bevin in Kentucky, as soon as the federal government provided that latitude for states to impose a work requirement for able-bodied, get some people off Medicaid, get them into the workforce, that's what we're supposed to want to do. He took it and ran with it. Governor Rauner is saying, I support that, but we got to get people jobs first. I mean, this is this chicken and egg argument. You're not incentivizing to get the job because they're being conferred benefits without it. So you're not really serious about restructuring that program, changing the incentives that encourage people to do the productive thing we want for ourselves, but also for them. So, you know, it's kind of everything, and then we're going to cut spend. We're going to raise taxes, we're going to expand programs we can't afford, we're going to confer benefits, but then once all that's done, then we're going to get to spending cuts.
Right.
I actually had one Democrat promise me after the ill-fated income tax vote that Madigan had promised their caucus property tax reform, real property tax reform. Have we seen that?
Wow.
And I just
Right after
laughed
the
at
income
her and
tax
said,
increase.
oh my gosh.
Every member of the, I mean, you know, with all due respect to present company, every member of the General Assembly is a fiscal conservative who's voted for property tax caps. We have the worst, the state in the worst financial condition of any state in the nation, and we have the highest property taxes in the nation. You can understand when people look askance when they hear the same rap they've been hearing for decades about how everybody's a fiscal conservative who's focused on property tax relief. So what is, I mean, to me, it seems like the only way to do this, with respect to property taxes and by extension spending at the local as well as state level, is put handcuffs on people. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights legislation that a number of states adopted in the 90s and the early part of the 21st century that actually did restrain the growth of government, index it to population growth plus CPI, that did put handcuffs so you had to make tough decisions even if you didn't want to. And it's the same thing with property taxation. You've got to put handcuffs on local units of government. You've got to focus the state's spending on its core deliverables, like K through 12 education. The state has to pick up more of the tab if you want relief and a return of people's home equity to them. We seem to have it completely reversed, including within the Republican Party, in terms of how this is going to work if we're going to make something work.
Yeah.
So on property tax reform, or property tax relief, the governor's talking about capping or freezing, freezing the highest property tax. Lock those in.
Right.
But I mean, because it could get worse, I guess. I mean, but that's not much of a selling point. We're going to freeze things at bad so they don't get worse. I mean, honestly, I asked this question somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but not totally. Is J.B. Pritzker, Dan Biss, the socialists on the other side, are they the last honest men in Illinois? They're proposing a progressive income tax hike. I'll pay for it. We're gonna increase tax. I mean, they're lying about it being just an increase on millionaires and billionaires. It'll be an increased tax on everybody. That's what the progressive income tax is. All the money's in middle income families.
Right.
So they're lying about that part of it. But at least they're saying we're going to fleece everybody some more to continue to build the dependency class in Illinois, which is our political base. Mm-hmm. They're transparent about it. What are we transparent about? What is it we want to do? What's the big idea coming out of the Republican caucuses, or big ideas on these topic areas that you guys are advocating, or that you're here bubbling about, that can kind of present that contrast to voters so they can say, yeah, let's go the direction that Breen and McDermed and Morrison are saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got to grow our way out of our problems, no question about it. We have to be a magnet all across the state for private investment, for people to come and actually see opportunity in Illinois rather than obstacles to their own success, to their own family's future, to their own family security. And so that's where the Governor Rauner is right, at least in his rhetoric. But he has not been able to deliver as a governor. And hopefully during the show today, we'll talk about an alternative. You asked, are these the last?
Marijuana?
Oh, right. There's a cash crop, right?
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to be a mob economy. Well, gambling, more casinos, slots, and all that jazz.
Right.
Drugs, marijuana. Maybe legalize prostitution while we're at it. Give somebody that racket to run. Protection money. I mean, what is it? Well, how are we going to? What is the? Yeah. To me, see, everybody, Republicans and Democrats, are taking like the Jesse Jackson Jr. approach to growing our way out. I'm not going to do anything unless we get Piatoned. Right? I'm not going to do anything for the South suburbs because I don't want to hit singles and doubles. I'm only interested in grand slams. So if we can't build that South Suburban Airport that I know we're not going to build, then we're not going to do anything. And I know it's not going to be built, but that's something for me to jawbone. It's the same thing we're saying. HQ2, which I hate to break it to people, isn't coming to Chicago. That is not going to happen. Amazon HQ2, that's our big grand slam now. Or generic rhetoric about growth, but specifically, what is it?
Well, let me put meat on. First of all, the reason why Chicago and Illinois is on the list is because we do have natural advantages. Now, I agree with you. I'm not counting on Amazon coming here, but the fact is that Illinois is a central location. We do have a diversified economy. We have a great transportation network. You can go from O'Hare to virtually anywhere in the world, and central time zone. All those things are natural advantages. It's these personnel and policy issues that are the obstacle for us. So we got to unleash that. But let's put meat on the bones on growth.
Okay.
So one of the reasons why, again, I'm opposing Bruce Rauner now in this primary, I'm for Jeanne Ives. He supported a bailout of Exelon and ComEd and made it more expensive for electric ratepayers. So one growth segment of the Illinois economy was actually in the chemical industry because Illinois is centrally located. We got a lot of pipelines, feedstock coming through Illinois, and low electricity prices. And the chemical guys were telling me these are good paying jobs. These are, if you're just a blue collar worker, you could easily be making $50,000 to $100,000 a year. Mm-hmm. The investment in these factories is in the tens of millions of dollars. It's generating tax revenue. It's generating property tax revenue. And these are investments that are made for 20 and 30 years. But if we put higher, so they were willing to deal with the high property taxes with these other advantages. You throw higher electricity rates on there and higher tax rate or income tax rates,
right?
And forget about it. They will find another centrally located area like Indiana, like Missouri, like a Kentucky, where they have those same opportunities and not Illinois.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what's happening, and that's why they have exponentially more manufacturing jobs created since the bottom of the Great Recession than does this Illinois with all of the advantages that we all know Illinois has. Right. Everybody talks about the advantages we have, I know, but we're frittering them away. So what good are they, right? So
I'm just saying we got to get the personnel right in terms of who is elected in the legislature, in the executive branch, and then also policy. Someone who understands policy at a deep and broad level and has the spine to actually enact it and to make the case to all of these different interest groups. And
understands how the legislative process works.
Right.
And is willing to work with the legislative process.
Yes.
Is that
messy and ugly as it is?
Is that to say that Governor Rauner hasn't?
Yes.
Check.
Well, for people that don't know exactly how the sausage is made and don't want to know, what has it been like the last 3 years? I mean, what has Rauner done that he shouldn't have done? What has he not done that he should have in terms of interacting with the General Assembly to move a growth agenda?
Well, I mean, I'll say I was in 2015 when he took office. I was very hopeful. Second time I met Bruce Rauner was when he talked about his favorite. He liked my pension proposal where we froze current pension credits, and then for future work, the individuals would be in a 401k. He said, yeah, I like the Morrison bill. Hey, great. We have a chief executive who understands the need for this. And much of his turnaround agenda, I agreed with. I think it was politically naive to think that we could get those things done in a super majority Democrat legislature. And so he should have had the wisdom to consult with some of us who had been down there, knowing the players, knowing where the potholes were in terms of making the case and actually implementing some of these policies. He didn't talk to us. He hired a lot of Mark Kirk people. So he should have pared down that list to actually get some smaller wins, get some momentum, rather than just coming in like a steamroller with the what was it, the sledgehammer, you know, calling every General Assembly member corrupt and inept. So corrupt, inept, you know, these are the people who are normally, right, you know, who are normally with you on a lot of these things and who you absolutely have to have in order to get to 60 votes in the House and 30 votes in the Senate.
You gotta be willing to horse trade a little bit. It's, you know, think about what's going to motivate some people to come and be with you here and what they might need over there that you'd be willing.
Well, you have to know what your principles are at a solid level before you horse trade. Because you just might give away everything and get nothing in return, and then all of a sudden you realize, oops, you know. And that's what we're kind of seeing right now with the school funding bill, where the governor is not happy with the bailout of CPS, you know, or the bailout of the CPS teacher pensions, right? And you can't claw that back very easily. You already gave it away.
Yeah,
you know
there's a little bit of problem with moving the goalpost.
Peter,
recurring problem with moving the goalpost.
House Republican floor leader, you penned a letter last fall that was unvarnished in its criticism of Governor Rauner and on this topic, among others, that we're talking about here in terms of how he's provided or not provided executive leadership in moving a policy agenda.
Well, and I, you know, when I get out my poison pen, it usually stings a little. So I mean, I said a whole lot in that letter, but I think, I mean, as we look at this globally, I think we've got a wonderful opportunity. And the opportunity, you know, when we go door to door, the number one name we hear is Mike Madigan. And I think the people of Illinois are ready that if we can provide them with a positive vision and say, hey, we've got something that can take the place of Mike Madigan, and we can use some of the anger that they've got against the speaker to get a few more of those seats that we need, along with pushing our gubernatorial candidates across the line. I think we've got an incredible opportunity there. So that, to me, gives you an opening. You know, I'm supporting Jeanne because I think she's going to be able to tap into that anger of the people who are ready for a change. And so that, to me, is kind of the thing. I mean, I've really more focused on that. And I think that positive opportunity is something that could be a great rallying cry for and a rallying point for the people.
Well, I will give Bruce Rauner credit for helping to put a lot of money into exposing who Mike Madigan is and his side business dealings and all this sort of thing. He has done a service to the people of Illinois in exposing how a state representative on the southwest side of Chicago could have so much power over all of state government. Okay? However, and it's a big however, and this was my disappointment in again, initially starting out in 2015, being excited about having a new governor who seemingly is right on a lot of the issues that I've been fighting for. But then to watch him get manipulated and get played and make really amateur mistakes to play right into his hands. And so, you know, take social issues that can be controversial, but there have been, there's sort of been some lines that have been established over the last 30 or 40 years. Okay, those have been shifting a little bit here and there. But on the abortion issue, there's a reason why the Hyde Amendment has survived 40 years at the federal level, at the state level, through Republican administrations, Democrat administrations. It's sort of been, Kristen McCreary said this. She said, there's sort of been a truce. Look, a lot of people are pro-choice, a lot of people are pro-life, but we're not going to force taxpayers to pay for elective abortions. That's just too far, and that's essentially what the Hyde Amendment is. And when this bill came up, really, and there was a big push by the left and those who want this, this past spring, we recognized what was happening. I mean, this is the perfect situation for Mike Madigan. He's under a lot of pressure from his more liberal members of his party to get this passed. And he also sees this as an opportunity to absolutely drive a wedge in the Republican caucus in the legislature and among Republican voters with a pro-choice governor, who we didn't realize at the time, now we know, had already filled out a candidate questionnaire where he essentially agreed with all of the major provisions of this and another bill that passed 2 years ago, the Healthcare Right of Conscience bill. So Madigan serves this up onto the governor's desk. And many of us were there trying to counsel him on every reason conceivable, a moral argument, a fiscal argument, and then if those didn't work, if those didn't work,
right.
The political argument. Governor, if you do this, you are doing exactly what Mike Madigan wants you to do. It makes your reelection in a general impossible. Don't do it. It is so painfully obvious to all of us. And he went ahead and did it, and that's why we're in.
After saying he wouldn't do it.
You're right. After telling all of us, I'm not going to do this. Very controversial issue. I'm not going to do this, and he did it. And now that's where we are, and that's why I think we have a real opportunity to present someone who is an accomplished leader, who does have a titanium spine, who may not win Miss Congeniality contest, but people want truthfulness. Stop being two-faced. Stop pandering to me. Tell me the truth. And then I will decide as a voter upon the full spectrum of who this person is, their character, their integrity, their capability, their wisdom on the issues, their positions on these issues. I'll decide who's good. And so I heard at lunch today someone saying, Jeanne Ives, she sort of reminds me of a Peter Fitzgerald. We need a straight shooter, fiscally conservative, socially conservative, but not beholden to a party that isn't going to hold to certain principles. I want someone who's principled. That's what I want more than anything else.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing on these issues is that the Republican caucuses were unified. I mean, 73 of 73 Republican legislators voted against HB 40, the abortion
Even the
bill.
pro-choice Republican senators voted no.
Per the kind of the Hyde Amendment truce that you're talking about. On sanctuary state, 67 of 73 Republican members of the General Assembly voted against it. So it's a little bit bizarre, I think, to people on the outside saying, wait a second, so the caucuses are unified and the governor sticks it in their back. He's susceptible to pressure. On the tax increase, that's the one thing that all Republicans are unified on. No, we can't raise taxes. Almost a third of your guys' caucus votes for the tax increase. They're susceptible to pressure. When Madigan has a supermajority in the House and Cullerton has a supermajority in the Senate, and they have a governor, it was only a few years ago, they don't move any of this stuff.
Right.
And so the pressure that Madigan is under by the radical left within his party, which is the base of his party, boy, it doesn't seem to visit Democrats when they're in control of everything to do the stuff, because I guess they're patient enough to wait for Republicans to get a little bit of power, and they'll do all the bad stuff for us. I mean, and so from an outsider's perspective, they watch this and they say, what is the Republican Party about exactly? When they're unified, they're not unified. The other side isn't susceptible to pressure from their opponents, but my party is susceptible to pressure from all of our opponents, fiscal issues and cultural issues.
Yeah.
So you wonder why the Republican Party's brand is about as popular as Lyme disease in this state, right? I mean, I don't mean this to be, but I don't mean this to be like piling on. But speaking of truthfulness and honesty, we have to confront the reality on the ground. That's the reality on the ground. There's a reason we're the super minority party, despite what Chicago Democrats have done to this city, to this county, to this state.
But Dan, even right now, we have an opportunity. If you look at the demographics of a similar state to ours, say like a California or a Massachusetts or some other states that have already gone hard blue, we do have a limited window where the people of Illinois will actually listen and take our ideas because they do have some recognition. The people recognize it, even if the Democrats don't. that we're in such dire straits that maybe we should give these Republicans a chance, or maybe they would give new ideas a chance. And that's kind of the thing that I'm looking at going, look, we have a gift in an electorate that absolutely despises the leading Democrat in the state and is ready for this change message, is ready for this new path. And so as bad as things are, it's funny, I'm going to tell on you, Tom, I think you and I were talking, should there be a conservative caucus within the House Republican caucus? I said, no, I mean, it is the House Republican caucus. I mean, you look at the votes for the most part, look, we had a real problem with the income tax increase, but I mean, you had exceptional pressure and issues on our side in terms of the way we handled it in response. So you've got a mostly conservative legislative caucus. For Republicans back home, the folks there representing you are, for the most part, right with you on all of the conservative issues. We've just got to move forward to that next step.
Yeah, but that makes
present the compelling vision.
But that makes these surrenders that much more vexing because of what you said, right?
Well, I mean, there was, look, some of it was mishandled. I mean, that was the problem. And I mean, we had people, what are you going to do to Reggie Phillips when he's literally watching his hometown just crumble around him? His state university goes from 13,000 enrollment down to 8,000. I mean, just, what do you do to that guy?
Yeah, but that didn't happen in, right, I mean, but that didn't happen in the 2017, 2018, that didn't happen in the 2017 session. That's been happening for a long time because the mismanagement, it's the going bankrupt in Hemingway. How did it happen? Slowly, then suddenly. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's what happened.
Same with our pension liability is going to happen.
Right. I mean, we didn't rack this up overnight. This has been, a concerted effort over a long period of time. This takes real work to get to the depths that we have plumbed, doesn't
Except
it?
the old man at the table hasn't been here, what, 7 years now?
Yeah, my 8th year.
Yeah,
well,
he's the senior member. I mean,
we're on
really
our
gonna
4th year.
Yeah, I mean, we're halfway there.
Well, I'm the senior member in terms of involvement in Illinois politics because I've been doing it since I got out of Sex Toy University up there in Evanston. So that's almost 25 years now. And let me tell you something. This Madigan play, I mean, I don't like Madigan either. But we have been running since before Lee Daniels was House Minority Leader, then Speaker, then House Minority Leader again, and Pate Phillip. I mean, go back to the 80s. Go back to Madigan's first his ascension to the speakership in the early 80s. We've been running this Madigan as the bête noire. How does the Republican Party defined? We're defined in the negative. We're not Mike Madigan. It's not enough. Mm-hmm. It is not enough. And I spoke before, everything broke bad. I said this to the governor and his people myriad times. And he's not Mike Madigan. That's his brand. And his brand has a less than 25% reelect number because it's not enough. Yes, people don't like Mike Madigan. They would like to see him deposed. And obviously, he's the most unpopular politician in the state. But it's not enough to buoy Republicans because they don't know who we are, where we're going, how we plan to get there. That alternative vision that you're describing has not been crystallized in the public's mind.
Right. Well, and just as a friendly amendment, not Mike Madigan is actually enough to get you to 40 or 45% of the electorate. It'll get you your safe Republican seats.
Yeah.
It won't get you to the place where we need the majority, to the governor's mansion, to be able to then make the policy changes.
No, that's right.
Right.
So,
but, I mean, that's all we're looking for. We don't need, we just need another 10%, 15% of people to come alongside us.
Okay, but I mean, that's the old economist line. You come to a ravine, you need to get to the other side. Assume a bridge. No, you have to build the bridge.
We've got half a bridge. We need to finish the bridge.
So finish it for me.
Right.
What do those planks look like? Finish the bridge.
And it's the various reforms we've been discussing here right now, which is, I mean, the pension reforms, spending reforms, and then pro-business reforms to help us grow. I mean, the sorts of things to pull government burdens off of people's backs. I mean, I think
some of those pro-business reforms would help local government too. Which are huge employers.
Exactly.
That's right.
For local government as well.
What about paring back government at every level? What about being sort of the minarchist party, to come up with a better marketing term? We're the only state in the Midwest. I think Ohio does actually too, but we have by a much wider margin have more government employees than manufacturing employees. Well, that's not right. That's not the way it should be. Mm-hmm. And so we have more elected officials and more units of government. We're the 6th largest state in the nation. So Texas is doing something different than we're doing with 4 times the population. What about that as part of the message to say we are going to, have to truly rethink and shrink government at every level?
We can't tackle the property tax problem unless we do that. Because every taxing agency is now the maximum has become the minimum every year for every agency in the PTEL areas.
Every
and
year you take the max out.
Yeah, because we're giving away our money if we don't tax to the max.
But on the property tax issue, just to extend that a bit, the Republicans play the same game, and Rauner is the worst at this. The Democrats do. It's a competition to see who can pour more money into K through 12 education. In the last 20 years, K through 12 education spending in real dollars has increased by 111%, and student enrollment has increased by 6%. 22x? Are we getting 22x better educational outcomes for our kids in grade school and high school? So why are we playing their game, the arms race of who can throw more money into administrative overhead and pensions for school districts? That doesn't produce better students. It's not making us more competitive. It's not forestalling the brain drain of people going to college out of state, not coming back.
Well, and I filed a bill on this one. We had a report last year talking about how our administrative spending, central office administrative spending, is 2 to 3 times the national average. If we were just to cut back to the national average, you're saving $500 million statewide every year. But the problem is no one could actually give me a straight answer as to how we even measure it, how we draft that up. We finally got it figured out, in January, February. So I drafted the bill, we crafted it, did all that. People are scared to jump on the bill because they're like, well, it's going to look like we're cutting spending. I'm like, you're cutting spending on administration, which could then go to either classrooms, if you need it in your district, your choice, or it can go back to your taxpayers, or both. Your call. But if we're going to try to pull down, the property tax spending, we've got to do something to cut the parts that everyone agrees we hate. Like, we hate administrative spending. Everyone knows it's bad. There's way too much of it. Well, let's get around some of these initiatives and pull that back.
A great man once said, "Words are the currency of politics." That great man was me. And
it's true.
What I think I meant by
Words
that.
are our tools.
Yeah, you have to make arguments. I mean, everything is people are scared to do this and people are scared to do that. They're scared to do the right thing because of what somebody may say about them, how somebody's going to attack them in a mail piece or a television commercial. Well, you make arguments over time. How do you build brand? Repetition and rapport. You make the arguments over time and you bring people along with you every step of the way. That's the hard work, the drudgery of politics and coalition building, a word you mentioned at the outset, Margo. And we don't do that. I mean, am I wrong?
We're not doing it where we need to be.
Yeah.
We're not,
Oh, well, explain.
Well, so for instance, and I'm a big fan of our caucus. So you've got the House Republicans folks here. You've got a lot of new people with new ideas that are not looking to be career politicians. There's really barely any left, if there are any at all. And each of us has a policy area where we are going deep. And it's just, for us, we're in 4 years. Tom, you've been in almost 8. We're able to develop that policy expertise, and we're starting to come up with these proposals that are innovative. Because you've got enough experience under your belt to know what's going on, but not enough to have been sucked into Springfield. Yeah, and so bringing those things together into a cohesive whole, I think, does provide us an opportunity to have, maybe we just need a little better coordination on it to say, look, there is a platform here. There are very specific things we could do, but also under a broader umbrella of growth and the things we've talked about already.
Okay, but it's not supposed to be a secret.
Fair enough.
And so you got like 24 comm staffers in the House Republican caucus. You got a governor who's spent $100 million over the past 3 years, and we're still falling prey to the same bull jive arguments of soak the rich and throw more money at education and all the other bromides of the left, and frankly some on the center right that are in your caucus and in the Senate caucus too. So.
We're not going to give any excuses for the Senate.
Yeah, of course, right, of course. but I mean, it's like we don't believe our own rap, and so why should anybody else?
Sure.
I mean, I just think like there's a need for the people who know better and are not interested in being career politicians to beat people's doors down rhetorically and lay it out in no uncertain terms and relentlessly and I just don't think we do that. And by the way, not do that where we're not doing that where we should. I mean, it's not like we're killing it in the suburbs.
Right.
The atrophy where I grew up in Wheaton, so I'm DuPage County with you, Peter, and I mean, the percentage of the statewide vote in statewide elections, I should say, the percentage Republican vote versus Democrat vote in DuPage County. That's not what it was like 20 years ago.
Oh, no, not at
I mean,
all.
it was 71% when George Ryan ran in '98. Today, it's in some statewide races, it's a battleground county. Well, you can't make the math work if you're not winning the collar counties. And in many respects, we're not winning, or we're winning by the skin of our teeth, and you can't make up the difference in Cook County, which, by the way, is another, I don't know who thinks that we can continue to seed like this 3.5 million person hamlet called Chicago and win statewide elections too, and just say, oh, it's Democrats. And you want to talk about unpopular politicians? Right behind Madigan is Rahm Emanuel in terms of the most unpopular politician in the state. What are we doing to take on Tiny Dancer? Nothing. What do we do to take on Tony Preckwinkle? Nothing. We don't even field candidates.
Okay.
I mean,
it's a good point, Dan. I mean, but to some extent, I mean, we're doing what we can right now. We need to be doing more in terms of what you're talking about. So I think most of the folks here would be open to further conversation. I mean, we're seeing at the door people are angry at Madigan. There's an opening. We're also seeing that, we are having more trouble because maybe folks are lazy because of Trump. They're like, oh, hey, we won the presidency. Mm-hmm. But, so there's not as much ground game activism. The traditional party structures, you don't have all the traditional party structures necessarily that you used to have. You have to build your own campaign. I mean, Tom had to build his own campaign, me too. Margo has as well. We're trying to strengthen the traditional party as we build our own campaign structures, but it's not been an easy struggle right now. And so, I wish I could give you a nice, clean plan.
No, it's not. It's not easy. But I think we have to have a reckoning, and everybody has to do a bit of the mirror test too. I mean, I'll take my share of the blame too. I've been around the state for 45 years, so nobody comes to the table with clean hands here in terms of where we're at. But and that includes, by the way, it's not just legislators. So this is for everybody listening and watching, and who wants to be engaged and thinks they're civically minded. I mean, what are you doing? What's the conservative movement doing? What's the pro-life movement doing? What's the Second Amendment movement doing in this state? I would say they're not holding up their end. They're not doing as much as they could either. This isn't just 73 Republican legislators. This is the people who consider themselves part of the conservative movement. This is people who think that their civic duty ends with showing up for a Republican primary and choosing their Republican candidates and then pressing and choosing the Republican candidates up and down the ballot in December as some kind of protest vote to Madigan and Chicago Democrats. Big deal. It's the easy stuff. I mean, people have to be challenged to frankly shoulder more of the load than they're shouldering up and down.
Well, I have a book recommendation. So Eric Metaxas wrote a book a couple years ago called If You Can Keep It. Mm-hmm. And the title comes from what Ben Franklin told a woman of Philadelphia after the Constitutional Convention. Right. So, Mr. Franklin, what'd you give us? Are we going back to a monarchy, a republic? Madam, we gave you a republic if you can keep it. So what I'm trying to do, and I granted, the problems that you're citing are huge problems and have to be addressed by the party as a whole and all of us. But in my local area, I'm trying to encourage local candidates to run for school board, run for village council, even if it's a district next to mine. I'm trying to help those people. Hey, this is what I did to win my election. This is how you can message this, and just try to encourage that sort of citizen activity, because you're not necessarily going to get it from the existing Republican Party right now. There are some strong local Republican organizations. I think Wheeling is an example of one. Ruth O'Connell is retiring this year, but she has been a phenomenal leader and encouraging precinct captains. Now, we do it a little bit differently in Cook, where the precinct captains or precinct committeemen, they are appointed, not elected. But she still is a real leader, and she leads by example. And there's some other good examples too. And that's what we have to get back to. But in the interim, we have to encourage conservatives, get involved. And then when someone does put their name on the line and step up, we can't just, pat them on the back and say, good job, It takes money. It takes money. I was at a fundraiser a couple of months ago, and the one of the speakers who put his money where his mouth is, he said, look, this is a righteous cause. This is a good candidate. If you believe in this, a lot of you in this audience, you tithe to your church, so you give 10% of your income to your church. Think about giving 1% of your income to this candidate, because this candidate is doing the right thing, fighting for the right causes, and needs the support now. And I took that to heart, and I looked at my income for last year, and I donated 1% to this cause, because I want to put my money where my mouth is and go beyond that and talk it up. And now we're invested. Yeah. Now, not everybody can do that. I grant it. I mean,
and there's a return on investment and good public policy.
That's
in the personnel that drives good public policy.
And I'm not saying that everybody can do that, but give the widow's mite. Give what you can, and invest in it, and then turn off the TV. It's not that productive anyway to watch Fox, where there's two talking heads repeating the same talking points.
Yeah.
If you listen for 15 minutes, you've heard the whole.
Absolutely.
I watch a lot more Sesame Street than most.
All right. Well, we're kind of
different. You're past that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that stop listening to people you already agree with. Stop talking with people you already agree with. Get out there.
How thick is your bubble? Kind of what the left was going through after Trump a little bit. How thick is your bubble? Get out and talk to people that are not part of your social circle. Kind of extend it, right?
And the other thing, too, is there's a temptation to do it on Facebook or to do it in social media, where, again, there's just more of, it's sort of like the Fox News talking heads, but, where it's you one-on-one with someone. Yeah. You're not necessarily going to change a person's mind. Make a couple points, but don't get dragged into
posting is not campaigning.
Correct.
Posting is not changing minds.
That's right. It's fruitless.
It's just, but it's just another information channel. I mean, if used properly, it's a way to get information out, to make arguments.
Of course.
But you don't have to get into the.
But I've seen threads. I've seen threads that were 20 and 30 back and forths, and I didn't see any minds being changed.
Yeah,
make your points 2, 3, and then if you haven't moved the person, move on. Move on to actually someone who is persuadable. Your neighbor who's raking his leaves, shoveling his driveway. That's what I did. We're shoveling snow, and I went and I talked to my neighbor. Hey, have you talked about, or have you considered who you're going to vote for in this governor's race? Oh, isn't Bruce Rauner doing a good job? Taking the fight to Mike Madigan.
Right.
Actually, let me correct that.
Yeah.
And boom, I've got someone flipped over to Jeanne Ives.
Yeah, I think
in 3 minutes.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that's frustrating is I think generally speaking, people want to be informed. They know they're getting snookered. They'd like to figure out how to not get snookered anymore. Most people are open-minded and they're willing to hear an argument or be presented with evidence to consider. But, I struggle at how proficient we are at doing that. Margo, you came to the General Assembly from, you're a longtime corporate lawyer, big energy concern.
Correct.
And I wonder what your perspective is now with a few years under your belt of the organizational structure and performance of a big, successful energy company as opposed to the organizational structure of the party and caucus, Peter, notwithstanding that you're in at present.
I would say that Springfield's very chaotic. I mean, I'm not saying that we didn't have our challenges in corporate America, but, and I've been thinking about what we were talking about earlier about our failure to communicate very effectively. And I think that we were looking for leadership. We were promised messaging. How many times did we discuss messaging with the governor in our caucus? And he promised he would do better because we were like, what's our message? What are our talking points? What are we on? And so I think, what does that say about us? I mean, maybe we should have realized that the gap existed and filled it, but the point is, I mean, there is a reason why that gap exists and how it got that way. In one way, I like Springfield because your power is yours. In other words, each rep kind of comes with, I come with my base and my power, and I can make it as big, or I don't have to have permission. At least on our side of the aisle, we don't have to have permission from anybody. I don't have to worry about my boss giving me permission to do something, or a direction, or a strategy, or a bill. And I like that. I like it being my my district, what I'm representing my group. I don't need to run it by 3 committees.
So is it the Republican Party need? I mean, and this has been a problem for a long time. I would say that kind of both parties are organized the same ways with the same cultural attitudes, which is, to treat the members of the General Assembly on your side as mushrooms. And
on our side or on their side?
On both sides.
Okay,
I
on
mean,
their side definitely. On our side, a little differently.
No. I'm saying historically, this is the culture we're
Okay.
coming out of.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew about the George Ryan era in particular, but it was really like that in Edgar too. Whereas because we're a party that I would argue has more independent thinkers and people that are going to be independent in terms of how they make their decisions, that are not so, as you were all kind of saying, steeped in politics as their bread and butter for the rest of their days. We need to look at legislators and others within the party as assets to be developed, not liabilities to be managed, whereas the Democrats view their caucus as liabilities to be managed. The joke was always, Madigan likes a supermajority, but he probably likes the majority better, less mouths to feed. It's a different philosophical approach, but I think you still have some holdovers of the George Ryan model within the Republican Party, people with a lot of money sometimes think that they're used to having people kowtow to them and just wait for orders and assent when they're told something. But
That would be a mistake in with our caucus.
Well, but that's my point is that but it still seems like we're not kind of all the way there in treating Republican legislators and other party leaders and grassroots as independent people, assets to be developed and deployed rather than liabilities to be managed.
My experience is that the group of legislators on each side of the aisle is pretty different. I was complaining last year about not getting my bills out of committee or not getting them out of Rules Committee, and then they all went to committees, but they were all sent to subcommittees. So I was complaining about not getting my bills out of subcommittee to somebody on the other side of the aisle, and she said, "What do you got to whine about? I just get told what bills I get to bring." So I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's how naive
and they've got
was.
a list of how they're going to vote on things and all that.
And they can afford to play Candy Crush because they have someone who comes and tells them how to vote.
Well, and the other thing, there's actually maybe even a better example of this more recently is in the wake of kind of the Me Too movement finally being visited upon Springfield, long overdue, I would argue. It's interesting. One of Madigan's operatives, who was removed after allegations of improper conduct across 4 campaigns, one of those 4 campaigns was Deb Conroy, who's a Democrat state legislator just to the east of you in eastern DuPage County. And she was essentially one of the people who had been harassed by this individual. She won't break bad on Madigan because she needs his money for her reelection in 2018 in the general election. She doesn't have a safe seat. So she was harassed by one of Madigan's staffers. She kind of wants to brush it away. She doesn't want to go in front of the camera. She doesn't want to say anything about the culture down there or the culture within Madigan world because she's that beholden and that dependent on the money for her reelection that she won't break bad. To me, that was a really telling moment about the culture in Madigan world.
Well, I brought a bill last fall, long before the Me Too movement broke in Springfield, asking that a party chairman cannot also be a member of the Illinois legislature. Or if you're a member of the legislature, you can't be a party chairman. So now that looks like kind of a excellent prediction of what's coming to bear. And the reason for that I brought the bill, and I didn't realize we were the only state in the country where this phenomenon existed. When you're in the ugly, you don't realize that there's a beautiful world out there where that doesn't even exist. We're living in this world for so long that we don't even realize that most states either don't do it or it's banned by their ethics.
Well, even most states, don't have a feudal system within the General Assembly where the Speaker has the kind of power to stop a bill from being called that Madigan has.
Well, and as I understand it, that's only a development the last few decades. That was not traditionally. When I talk to real old timers who are gone now, they said, well, we knew what bills were coming up.
Yeah,
we had a list, we had some idea. In other states, I think in Indiana they get several days' notice before the bill comes forward. I do want to say, though, kudos to Representative Conroy. She came forward. No one should have to suffer what she and others appear to have suffered.
Of course.
And so, I'm glad that we on the Republican side, for the most part, have handled these situations more quickly and more swift. I mean, we've done it more swiftly. We get this taken care of for the most part. I don't want to, throw stones, but I mean, certainly this culture within the Madigan Democrat machine, you are seeing it coming apart. I mean, those are his top field generals that are getting tagged with this stuff.
What reason do we think that it was only those two people and that it was only on the political side?
Well, Elena Hampton, the first woman to come forward and accuse Madigan specifically of covering up the bad behavior of another of his top lieutenants, Kevin Quinn, the brother of Chicago Alderman Marty Quinn. She said there were going to be others. And boy, she was right. I mean, she was a campaign worker. She knew, and she, it's a small world, and word travels. But in the wake of this, you've had Jeanne Ives call for Madigan to step down. You've had a bunch of Republican legislators and legislative candidates call for Madigan to step down. Should he step down? And do you think that the Me Too movement could actually depose Mike Madigan before Republicans get a chance? What do you think?
This is, I mean, it's certainly the biggest challenge he's faced to his speakership since I think any of us have been there.
Yeah.
This really.
And wouldn't it be ironic if women are the key? And, obviously my bill indicates what I think. I think that for one person to exercise that amount of power creates, so much ugliness, because that much power is always going to result in bullying of all kinds, not just sexual harassment, but all kinds of bullying, which we see in Springfield as well. It's not just out. I mean, we don't call people names on the floor.
No, you wait till you get up.
Normally.
Yeah. You do it
Try
the
to
way.
avoid it, yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'm hearing more and more just your rank and file voter and elected officials say, yeah, it's time that Mike Madigan leaves. I mean, that should have happened a long time ago. But you have Scott Drury has been pretty vocal about it. You have other Democrat lawmakers, Kelly Cassidy, I think, has
Heather
said.
Staines.
Right.
So the gubernatorial candidates now.
Oh, yes, of
I mean,
course.
that's
yeah.
several of their major candidates are now saying he should go out.
That's right. And I mean, they're not leaders on this. I mean, I think they're responding to the headlines and the pressure and all that. But the fact that they're saying it, I think, is hopeful.
But here's the thing, because we're so Madigan focused. Madigan's got to go. Madigan's got to go. Yeah, agreed. Does anything change overnight if Madigan goes away and another Democrat backfills him and has the same power that he has?
Here's what I think, and shoot this down, but having grown up in a family business, it's very difficult to transfer a family business from one generation to the next, and then exponentially harder to go to the third or fourth generation.
Is that what your dad said when he transferred it to you?
No. We got he was in a dying industry, quick printing, so we did something different. But I have other family members who've had businesses, and I have supporters that are family businesses. It's difficult because the second and the third and the fourth generations, they don't understand the sacrifices that were made to make the business a successful enterprise. And so here's where I bring it to the political realm. So from what I understand, Boss Daley was Mike Madigan's political godfather.
Right.
So if he's the first generation, Madigan's the second generation, I don't see who has the same work ethic, who has the same strategic ability that Mike Madigan has. I mean, clearly there is going to be a scramble to take over. But
there'll be a drop-off in talent, political talent. I mean, dark arts kind of talent, but talent nonetheless. But will the culture change? Or do you think the drop-off in talent provides an
I think it's going to affect
I
think it's going to affect the makeup of the legislature too, because I think Mike Madigan tolerates people in his legislators in his caucus who are going to play Candy Crush or whatever. Just vote for me for speaker. You do what I tell you to do. You're going to get a pension. You're going to have the prestige and the title and all this kind of stuff.
You'll get this much every 2 years for your campaign.
Yeah, and so he tolerates that. I see other leaders in the legislature that aren't going to have that same kind of. They aren't going to put up with laggards, and they're going to support them, but they're not going to care as much if that person doesn't fight, for that seat.
And who are the natural successors? Because he doesn't have a protege. Not
right.
To the extent that he was, he doesn't tolerate any other areas of power. That's not okay with him.
Well,
so
folks have left. Folks who were his natural proteges. I mean, he's stayed on so long. he's almost like he's not the political godfather, he's a political grandfather, and his grandchild is going to have to come in and take over.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a very interesting strategy. Now, I will say, I mean, one thing about Madigan's program, he doesn't care about all the other business in the legislature. He cares about your key performance metrics on the campaign trail. Are you knocking the doors he wants you to knock? Are you making the phone calls and doing that? And I don't see anyone on the Democratic side who has got that sort of just maniacal focus on the numbers and on that performance. I mean, he runs it like a business.
The thing is, though, in those, now I see that in these swing districts where he absolutely has that kind of pressure. But in their safe seats, I don't know, I don't see people out working hard. And that's why I'm saying that if the Republican Party were to put some people up who are credible candidates, who would do the hard work of going door to door, and you had volunteers that were really motivated, I think you could have some surprising upsets.
Yeah.
Because the people who live in that district, they're sick of it. They are sick of having an unresponsive...
We could do to Democrats what Madigan did to Republicans, which is pick up seats in places that should have never been held by a Democrat. Jack Franks for all those years in McHenry County. Deb Conroy in Eastern DuPage, that shouldn't be held by a Democrat. That seats in Lake County, seats in Will County. I mean, all over the place. Southern Illinois, where, you know, Mitt Romney, the presidential candidate, Mitt Romney, Donald Trump, doesn't matter. They win seats, they win legislative seats in Southern Illinois by 35 points that are held by Democrats, right? So there's opportunity there, perhaps.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's where we've been picking them up so far. We hadn't been able to get them in the suburbs. If we can convert the suburban seats, then you've got a good shot at the majority.
All right, well, we better end on an optimistic note. All right, thank you so much, these conservative reform legislators, Tom Morrison, Margo McDermed, Peter Breen. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of Against the Current. Appreciate your perspectives and insights.